I mean, I got a lot of questions, but I just kind of want to know what your, like, where did this all come from? Like, what was your inspiration for exploring the element of water? Like, was there something that just clicked in you one day and was like, whoa, water is something more than we think? Or is it kind of like a gradual process of uh, finding out and,
Yeah.
seeing what
Sorry,
it is?
let me get this plastic bag away from my cat once again. Of course, they find the one thing that makes
Yeah.
the most noise when you. Um, so yeah, I mean, I actually my journey with it started not with water at all. Like I had no concept or affinity to water specifically. I was more like nature loving person. I just love plants, animals, and always wondered about the question of consciousness.
Hmm.
Like, what is consciousness? What's our origin? Those meaning of life, purposes. And then I went to architectural school. So I'm an architect. So I study architecture. And during that time, I figured, well, what is a tree? Like I try to understand what is a tree. Like there's so many things around us that we just accept as what it is. And nobody can really explain what a tree is. Why is it there? What is it doing? So I said, well, let's look at a tree as a building. If a tree was architecture, who's the designer? Who's the architect? Who's the dweller? The function of a tree. And in that study, I found out that water is the architect, is the dweller. Is so that's how water came into the picture for me personally, was
Mm.
through the architecture of nature.
Oh, so it started with trees essentially, and then you realized how water moves through nature and moves through these trees.
Yeah, like how, well, there was, I think it came from a few different, I think everything I was working on suddenly collided into one. So
Oh,
I
I
was
see.
thinking about, there's definitely an agency in life. There's something, there's someone that's doing something. Life is not
Hmm.
random.
Hmm.
Then looking at the invisible layers in life, like there's definitely layers we don't see. And whoever that someone is, it's invisible. And then architecture of nature, water, then understanding that water is invisible. And suddenly
Oh.
it all clicks. You're like, wait, there is an invisible layer for life. It is
Mm.
water and it is what's moving everything. So at that point, I was just like, okay, like now I get it. Like
Mm.
it was definitely a moment where everything just sparked.
When you put it that way, what came in my head was water is like the working hand of God or
Mm-hmm.
consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like the driving force, right? I think you have a saying that matter is like the structure, and then water is what shapes the structure, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that water is the glove on the hands of consciousness,
Mm.
right? So, because some people, let's say, I want to keep it open. So, we can use water as a symbol for consciousness for people that are not comfortable putting that label on,
Hmm.
because I think there's different levels of conversation. We can talk about pure consciousness coming into being. So, that predates water.
Yes.
We can talk
Hmm.
about within the human story, in this material world, water is the glove on the hands of consciousness, moving around the building blocks, which is matter,
Mm. Okay.
right? So we're
Mm.
two human beings talking about the story within the human structure,
Hmm.
the human story, right?
Hmm.
That's one conversation. So it all depends on what level of conversation we're having and where we are, right?
Yeah.
So for me personally, I like to be just water in
Hmm.
that world of like superstructures outside of the human story. But then I bring everything I understand and learn into the human story, into language, right? Because
Mm.
once we bring it into language, we basically take it down a notch, and we dumb it down, basically, right?
In a way, yeah, it's kind of like it is taking it down to concept because it seems like water is also something that in its truest form and its purest form goes beyond the concept. So it is like you have to avoid using the wrong terminology, right? Is that what you're getting
Mm.
at? Mm,
Yeah, and language is tough. Language is very hard. But I think one of my advantages is because English is not my first language. I have to explain really complex concepts with very simple vocabulary.
mm-hmm,
So I think that's what makes my channel attractive to people. They can understand what I'm talking about. I
mm-hmm.
don't use big words. I don't use, numbers and names, and like it's not a history lesson.
Yeah, yeah,
Like it's just
exactly.
very, very simple. It's very conceptual, but
Mm-hmm.
simple.
That's the way to be, because if you overcomplicate things, it's just not gonna, people aren't gonna get it. But yeah, everything that you say in your videos, I'm just like, yeah, oh my god, that makes sense. It's just so many revelations that I've never thought about. And I think that's what it is too, is that a lot of people just don't think about the concepts that you're bringing up. And then if
Mm.
you bring to light something that people usually aren't thinking of in such a simple way, it's like this light bulb effect. I'm just like, oh wow, how did I not see this before? Like, it's so obvious, but we just, for some reason, don't think of water the way that you do. And thankfully, you're, I guess, spreading the knowledge. But it's such a, I don't know. I'm speaking from personal experience. Like, I've never really thought of water before I discovered your channel in the way that I do now, and it's pretty cool. It's like a different aspect of viewing life. Essentially, it's yeah, man, you're doing great work. I really like it. It's awesome.
Thanks. I mean, that's the feeling I have every day. I mean, I get goosebumps as you even talk about it. Like every day, that's the feeling of like
Mm,
living in that awe into the wonder of life.
mm,
And I think that's the goal really, is to find, because I think growing up, we're wishing for it. Please let there be something magical to this life. That's something,
yeah. Mm,
further, deeper. And then when you find it, you just like, that's it. Then, because I think something about having motivation in life that is not out of fear. Most most of people are motivated out of fear of
mm-hmm.
being homeless, of being sick, of being helpless, of being, there's so many things we're afraid of. So we work and we save money and we do things. I work hard all the time, but because I love life and I see what we're doing here. So when you understand kind of the purpose of human beings in this equation, then you can really be fully motivated and creative out of that, out of
Mm,
the joy of understanding life rather than fear.
yeah, exactly. And that's what we all want in this life. I think that's what's an ailment that's a lot of people suffer from. I know me at one point did. It's like a sense of purpose in our life, a sense of like place in our in the universe, essentially, like knowing not exactly why we're here, but I guess giving us a reason to just be here. You know what I mean? Like, what am I trying to say?
Yeah, because we're in a very strange situation.
Yeah.
We didn't choose, at least we don't know that we choose to come here. We
Hmm.
don't remember the past before entering this vehicle. And
Yeah.
that's by design on purpose. And we don't know where we're going after, which is also
Hmm.
design. So
Mm.
so it's easy to get caught in thinking that this is life, where this is actually the temporary place.
Yes.
This is like taking, you're in this very short journey in this vehicle to achieve a certain purpose. Like like we are now astronauts. We're away from the body of consciousness in a little vehicle, separated, and then we go back.
Mm.
When we go back, we're like, oh, now I get it. I know, you know.
And then maybe we go back again. Who knows?
I think so. I mean, I think that's where water is helpful. It's helpful in understanding that the water in my body goes back to the ocean, back to the clouds, rain, then a plant, an animal, a
It's a cycle.
person. So the cycle of water is the cycle of the soul.
Mm.
The way we describe it, that's how we describe it. You go back to all the ancestors and everyone you ever loved. That's where they are.
Hmm.
So the cycle of water is the cycle of the soul. And then you can explain the ideas of reincarnation, the ideals of that cycle of the souls and how it works.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's great. That's amazing.
Yeah. So water is a good symbol in that way. It's the it's the best substance to help explain things that are kind of beyond words.
Mm,
Like when you try to understand your soul, right? Like the way that you are a drop of water right now, the water in your body, but compare that to the entire ocean and atmosphere, which is actually one body of water. The whole ocean and atmosphere, that's one body of water.
mm-hmm.
So you can understand how when you dissolve back to that, you become one with that ocean, but you're
Yeah.
still now one, like the fractal side of that, right? So
Yeah.
with water, you can explain that. You can actually see it like, oh, yeah, the drop dissolves into the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
There's no trace of the drop anymore. It
Yeah.
is just one at that moment. But then you can take a glass of water out of that and create that illusion that this is an individual, for a
Right.
short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Then you pour it back to the ocean.
It's a perfect metaphor because it's us, right? It's essentially it's a great metaphor for to show people because literally you're showing people that that is quite literally us.
Yeah, absolutely. One body of water, one body of consciousness.
Mm.
Yeah.
What is so I mean you said one thing that like our purpose in this universe, the greater picture kind of is to free water from being frozen in a way to like because the a
Hmm.
natural water state is like a flowing state, like like we all
Hmm.
know water that's not frozen, and when it's frozen it's not in its purest form, right?
Not the ideal. Yeah.
Ideal
Because
form.
because for water, there's two things that are important: uh, freedom of movement and temperature. Like being at a certain temperature,
Mm-hmm.
which allows it to be liquid water. And then, so when you're that liquid water, you're fully connected. Water is the most active and creative when it's liquid.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's ice or gas, it's useless.
Mm.
But being ice, it's even worse because you're frozen in time and you're frozen in your movement and you're just helpless. It's like being in jail or something like that. So for water, the goal is to be liquid.
Mm-hmm.
The ideal temperature for water is in our bodies. We know exactly what the temperature is. And all human beings have the same temperature inside. So
Mm-hmm.
your body works very hard to keep that temperature always the same. And that's one of the main functions of our bodies. And then when you look at our mission, what we're doing in life is basically we're melting all the ice. We take the water into homes. This is architecture where they can be in the ideal temperature and the ideal state, and it's in a constant flow. And then when we go out to space, we will basically connect with other bodies of water, bring that ice back into the flow. So
Mm.
our goal is to expand. So it's both taking the water on Earth and giving it freedom of movement in space. So it's not um, subjected to the elements, like we never know if the next ice age or the next, meteor hits and we evaporate. But when you're, you know, it's kind of a new creature once we design a space station out in space and then water is in circulation in there, right?
Mm.
Because that's what they do, right? The water is in full circulation through our bodies, out of our bodies, back to our bodies, right?
Mm.
And that's kind of the ideal state for water. So it's kind of recreating architecture of life for space.
It's such a like it's not water isn't like a it's not a thing. It's just a flowing, it's like a current. It's a constant current, right? There's no like such thing technically as just one piece of water. Like all like I
Right.
guess you could say one drop of water is essentially all of water. It represents the entire flow of the universe, it seems. It's kind of like magic in a way.
Well,
It's
that's
strange.
the fractal nature of nature, right? So, which is again a way to help people understand consciousness. One drop of water has the same complexity of consciousness that the entire ocean has.
Yeah.
That's why a fly is as sophisticated as it is, or any body of water. It doesn't matter your size.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is independent of scale, which is
Mm-hmm.
a fractal. So one drop of water is as intelligent as an entire ocean.
It's
in
like
that way.
it kind of like shows the order of the universe, uh, and it shows it that it doesn't matter. The locality doesn't matter. The size doesn't matter. Like no matter what, the properties are going to all be the same.
Mhm.
It's such a yeah, and it's such a easy thing to visualize in a way when you use the water metaphor. Like this, like water this size is the same, has the same properties as the Atlantic Ocean. It's
Yeah.
great. That's awesome.
That's why I don't categorize water as matter. I think
What do you categorize it as? What, just water? It's
it
simply.
is it is the thing between the two, right? Like I said,
Oh,
it's
okay.
between consciousness to matter.
Mm-hmm.
There's water. So in that process of becoming from pure consciousness to something,
Mm-hmm.
water is in the between.
Hmm.
And one of my recent videos was about Thales, the philosopher, the first philosopher, the first philosophy, the first theory was that water is the first principle, that everything comes from water. And so back then they couldn't, they didn't know what we know today scientifically, and they couldn't explain it in the same way. So they tried to package it all into one theory. So they thought the earth was flat, it was floating on water, and that basically life comes up from water into rock, into plants, into people, right? That
Mm-hmm.
everything comes from water,
Mm-hmm.
because water was the only thing that could be both solid, gas, and liquid. So they thought a rock is just another form of the solid water.
Oh, I see.
And so even back then, intuitively, they saw that there's something as far as consciousness becoming into matter, that water was in the way, right?
Mm.
So I think it's a bit different from the way they described it, but in theory, in concept, yeah, water predates everything. Even in mythologies, biblical stories, when they describe the gods, they they're basically hovering over the water and then creating life. But they
Mm-hmm.
never create water. Nobody ever
Mm.
creates water in those stories and mythologies.
Mm. That makes it seem very like a divine. I don't even want to say thing. It's like a divine
Exactly. Yeah.
flow, a divine
Mhm.
process.
Yeah. I mean, in Judaism, water is called living water. In Christianity, is holy water.
Mm.
In India, the most holy place is the river, the Nile. In Egypt, like everywhere, everyone agrees on one thing: water is life. It's the source of life. It's where evolution started. So I mean, and we are balloons of water, just walking, talking trees, basically.
Do you think we can have, all right, so we talked about before, there's the greater consciousness like, itself, just, the greater, God, some may say, it's just infinite
Hmm.
consciousness, right? But then there's also the human consciousness, like the what we can kind of like zoom in on Earth. So do you think in order to have any kind of consciousness, I guess, which could be just so far out of this world, you need water? Or do you think there could be another being that doesn't necessarily have an element of water, like some kind of being that, or maybe just less so of water? Because like what percentage of we of water? Isn't it like 70%?
When you're born, you're more like 90, and then you dry
Oh,
out as you get older.
you
So
dry
now
out.
you're probably 80, 70. When
Hmm.
people are about to die, they're like 65 to 70. Um,
So do
but
you
I
think
think
you
if there
can have like a
is,
less percentage, or even just like 0%, and then have some kind of consciousness come from that? Or is water, you need that in order to have some kind of form of consciousness?
so there's two answers. One is that in our life, in our reality right now, we have yet to find anything that is conscious without water. So you will find a lot of elements. None of them are active, they're all passive. So
Hmm.
I call them potential consciousness. And then we find water, which is active consciousness. So I don't want to take away from the elements that they have the potential. They are potential consciousness. They do come from consciousness, but they come from consciousness to be a building block.
I see. Hmm.
And then from consciousness comes active elements, which so far is water. And that's an active agent of consciousness in this world. to the second part of the question, there could be another consciousness. It would be a different liquid.
Oh.
So you could find somewhere out in the universe a different, it will have to be a liquid. So when you start to understand matter, if matter is conscious, it's liquid. If it's active consciousness, it will be liquid. So you might find another liquid that has in it the activity and the properties of consciousness. I find that here on this planet, the opposite of consciousness, the mirror side of it, is like oil, the black tar is the opposite.
How so?
So, because you have water is clear, and that tar is the opposite. It's black, no light can pass through it. Life grows out of water, and fire is used to break down what water is building. So you can imagine fire and water, right? They're like a mirror of each other.
Yin and yang.
So we use fire to break down what water creates. And that black tar is kind of like the mirror opposite of water.
Wow. Yeah, I've never thought of that.
You do have things that kind of, some people might want to give it like a negative aspect, to the oil, to the tar, to the fire. But it's not that powerful, because fire is a tool in the hands of water. Yeah, fire is just part of our tool.
Yeah, it's yin and yang. They just complement each other. It's interesting too, because oil comes from the decomposed beings of millions of years ago. So it quite literally is death. And then water is life. Man, this is blowing my mind. This is great.
Yeah. And that black tar, that leftover from life, in a way, that's the thing that could not be recycled back to the cycle of water. I see it as the trauma. All the trauma of life settles down into that. And now what we're doing is we're digging that out and we're burning it. We actually have a certain goal in our life to burn all of that. And we're doing that in a very sophisticated and controlled manner, so we don't suffocate ourselves. So we're doing it in a lot of small burns all over the planet. And we use that to also warm up the water.
It's like the concept that you can't create or destroy energy. Like, we are quite literally burning our energy from years ago and using it and it goes through the process of
So it's basically stored energy from the sun from billions and millions of years ago.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Wow.
But yeah, I think that's why I see channel water as something that will kind of exist forever, because it touches on every possible aspect of life.
Yeah, and it's timeless knowledge.
Through that lens of looking at through water and not through the human story.
So your book, Faces of Water, can you go through your inspiration on where you wanted to how you came up with that photography, and anything else you want to tell us?
So while I was doing all the study I mentioned, as far as architecture, thinking about consciousness, then I realized that water is a living being, and I started treating it as one. And I always had like experiments that I would do in my studio. So it's like kind of alchemy in a way. And as I was doing my experiments, one day an image appeared. I was just moving, like I was working with different substances. I was mixing them into the water. And one day I just poured it out. And then I looked and I saw an image. There was an image there. And at that moment, I just realized, I was like, I'm actually seeing water for the first time. I'm seeing the movements in the water. So water is clear. We don't see the movements in the water. The only thing we see is reflections on the surface of the water, or you see particles that are in the water. Like, just like the wind. You'll see it, a twist or a hurricane if there's debris in it.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were laughing at me at the beginning when I said water is invisible. We can't see water, because they were like, well, here's a lake. I see it. I'm like, yeah, but you don't see the movements in it. You don't actually see what the water looks like. You only see the shape the vessel gives it.
Yeah.
or the reflection on the surface of it. And so when I saw those images, I immediately understood what I saw, and I saw it as a gift also from water. So it was like, this is something that um, the water itself is giving me. It's like, yeah, cats again.
They always find a
so,
way. Damn cats.
so
Do you think water goes beyond senses? Because we can't smell water unless there's something in it. We can't taste it, right?
beyond all senses, yeah.
That's
You can't
so
see it, you
interesting.
can't taste it, you can't see, like, none of that.
Can you
It's
touch? I
beyond all.
mean, well, if water is exactly 98.6 degrees, which or
Mhm.
98.7, whatever our body temperature is, if we touch it, we probably won't be able to feel it, right? Either, unless
Right.
it's
Do you
moving.
know that sensation where you're in the water and you don't move, and
Yeah.
suddenly you forget you're in water? You don't feel it anymore until
Mm-hmm.
you move again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, like flotation tanks, they use that
Mm-hmm.
to kind of trick you, and then you feel like you're floating.
Have you ever been in one of those?
Yeah, yeah. And
Oh
I
man.
think I want to get one
Oh, me too. Yeah.
permanently. But my favorite thing is Watsu or water dance. There's a few names for it,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a treatment you get in water. So the water is your body temperature, and somebody's holding you and moving you. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like a 3-dimensional stretch, massage, movement. It feels like a hug from Mother Nature.
That's awesome. I've never heard of
So
that. How do you spell that?
it's like shiatsu, but water. So it's Watsu,
Watsu.
Watsu,
Okay, I'll
Watsu.
look that up after. That sounds interesting.
That's the best thing you'll ever do for yourself. It's so nurturing. It's so healing, and not even in a strange way, just physically. It's just so
Mm,
nurturing for the body. So then with the photography, then when I saw the images of the water, immediately I was like, okay, I need to think about the name for this photography. And then I spent years just developing it and making it perfect. And immediately the name Faces of Water came into mind because the first images I saw faces, just like faces of people, of animals. Um, Basically, anything that exists in the world exists first in water.
mm,
And that's why I realized at that moment that water, like all the blueprints for life, exist in water,
mm,
and that the water is the responsible and the architect of all those. And so much of what I know about water comes from the study of those images.
mm,
So, from understanding the images, seeing what happens in them, both on a physical level as an architect, scientifically, and also more metaphysically, seeing the nature of the fractal within water and that happening, which was amazing. Because it
mm-hmm,
doesn't matter what size, what amount of water you'll use, you will get those images and the complexity. I mean, it doesn't matter how many times I say it, the images are not microscopical.
mm-hmm.
They're real scale. They're like this big and bigger. It doesn't matter how many times I say it. When people see the images, the first thing is like, so this is microscopical, right? I'm like, no, because that's what we expect when we see that level of complexity. We
Mm-hmm.
expect it to be under a microscope.
You mean the images like the ones that are behind you?
Yeah. Or in the book or anywhere. Yeah. There's
So
lots
what
of
is
them
your
online.
technique for getting that image, if you could explain it simply?
The best way I can explain it, because I do want to get a patent for it. So
Oh, okay. I don't want to
I
give away
can't
any
reveal
secrets.
everything,
Mm-hmm.
but I developed a film. And the secret about the film is that it's liquid. So
Oh,
the
okay.
film is in the water and it can capture the movements in the water. Because
Mm.
what you want to see, what you want to capture is water moving in water, those currents,
Oh,
the
I
wind,
see.
right? If you could see the wind, if you can capture it, imagine sending out a parachute into the air and it captures beautifully the movement of the water, of the
Wow.
air or water. And the film that I made is made out of nanoparticles. So my negatives are this big, let's say. You can
Mm-hmm.
zoom into them forever. You can take 1 by 2 inch out of it and scale it up to the size of the Empire State Building. So that's why my images are so perfect. You never see a
Mm-hmm.
pixel in them because the film itself is so fine.
Mm.
So yeah, so it's really been amazing working with those images, and I've made huge, on sides of buildings to huge fabrics and lots of exhibits all over the world with Faces of Water.
That's amazing, man. Is how long have you been doing this? Because you said you started off as an architect, right? So is this within the last few years, or has this been going on for a while?
Well, the first stage of just um, researching consciousness and the activation in nature started since I was a kid. So that was always the journey
Mm,
I was on. And my goal was to one day make an invention, to invent something or discover something. Always been
mm,
my goal. And then 2013, that's when I made this discovery and invention of
mm,
that. So at that moment, it just, like I was on this constant journey going up. And then at that moment, just went straight up and never
mm-hmm.
came back down after that.
Yeah.
Like nothing else interested me after that.
Mm. It's like something that was hidden in plain sight, right?
I mean, yeah, literally. I think that's the case for most people. It's
Yeah.
right there, but they can't see it. That's why I don't think it's something to yeah, like I never judged myself for not seeing it before because I literally could not see it before.
Hmm. Yeah.
When you have an aquarium of water at home, you look at the fish in the water. But
Mm.
if you could actually see the water the way I see it with this photographer, you would just be looking at the water. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's the most magical thing there is, just seeing
Hmm.
those movements and all those forms of life in front of you. I mean, it's really
It's
like
magic.
seeing the spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. Seeing the spirit. Yeah, because we cannot see a spirit of life. That's so
Mhm.
profound, man. It really is. It's like if you when you take that viewpoint, you're quite literally showing people the spirit of this universe, like kind of like a microscope into like the metaphysics of how the process unfolds. And it's a whole new take, man. I don't think anybody else is doing what you're doing, you know. It's you're probably the only one.
This point, I think like Masaru Emoto, he started with taking pictures of crystals, but
Oh,
that's frozen. That's frozen water.
yeah.
So the problem was he took away the two things that are most important for water: heat and movement.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm,
saw crystals of water, but still, water is so complex and beautiful and so personal at every point, right? So every snowflake is different,
mm,
and every snowflake can react to whatever the environment was. But but again, I stay away from things that are not fully scientific. As
mm-hmm.
much as this subject is hard for anyone that is a scientist to accept or talk about, but this is actually science. This is not. So I stay away from anything else that was done over the years that is not scientifically solid.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people get lost. They think that we can use the science of matter to examine the spirit and consciousness,
Yes.
which is not possible at
Mm-hmm.
all. So a lot of times I have to put scientists in place and be like, look, this is your world over there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't come here. Don't tell me what
Mm-hmm.
consciousness is.
Yes.
Don't tell me that you even show me the tools, show me the increments. How do you measure consciousness? I come from
Mm-hmm.
the art world. Consciousness, the study of consciousness is art,
Yes.
everything
Yeah.
that has to do with our expression and imagination,
Mm-hmm.
and the creative side of life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting, I'm in the middle between art and science here,
Yeah.
trying to hold both worlds at the same time.
And that's what water is. It's in the middle between, like you said before, between matter and consciousness. Essentially,
Right.
you're like the mascot for it in a way. Just
Right.
you're an extension for that yin and yang process. It is the flow. Water is like the in between of yin and yang.
Hmm.
It is the flow in between it.
Right.
It's the connection between the physical and the metaphysical. Oh man, this is great, man.
Mm.
I think your philosophy can definitely um, touch a lot of people, and I'm not just saying that because it is such an idea that it's hidden in plain sight. We don't think about a lot, but once you are, at least for me, once I was dove into your videos a little more, I was like, oh my god, like how did I like? Of course, like this is obvious now, and I think you said that in the video too. You're like, this is just something that was just obvious to me, and it's really it is like once you see it, you can't unsee it now. It's like
Yeah.
it's something that's just always there, just yeah, I look at water differently. It's
That's
great,
a
man.
nice thing. It has a positive effect both on our spirit and our physical life,
Hmm.
both in understanding how important it is for us to take care of water environmentally. That's a big issue, water. Then access to water, right? I mean, I think one of the, because I changed my identity to water. I identify as water.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I did that was because we learned very early, I think this was like 15 years ago, that big corporations were buying water rights all over the world because they
Mm-hmm.
realized water is going to be more expensive than energy, than gold, than oil. And access to water is a birthright.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to achieve that birthright is if we identify as water, because then nobody can, you know, people can say, well, nobody said you have to eat the best food, or, when it comes to food, there's a full range. But when it comes to water, there is no range and there
Yeah.
shouldn't be any. It should just be healthy, clean, clear water.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we pay taxes for infrastructure of water. Yet there's many cities here in America that has horrible water, toxic water, all the way from Flint, Michigan to places here in Los Angeles. So this is not something that even has to be in question. We just have to hold all of our elected representatives, hold them accountable. We pay
Mm-hmm.
taxes. First thing we pay for is that
Mm-hmm.
access to healthy, clear water for everyone, everywhere. And
Mm-hmm.
that should never be in question, ever, before roads, architecture, anything else. So I think like that's why it's important for us also to start seeing that side of it. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just spiritual. It's not just meaning of life. This is functional, healthy human beings. Starts with water,
Mm.
and people that don't have access to healthy water will be sick, and
Yes.
in life they won't succeed as other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just something, just like
Something we take for
education. And
granted.
yeah, my cats really enjoy this conversation.
Yeah, I guess so.
they're, they're bored here.
Oh, there's two cats?
Yeah, there's
Oh,
two,
that's great.
Rain and River.
Oh, that's awesome. Can you explain the origins of water? Like how, okay, we can rewind the tape a little more and go all the way back to the Big Bang, this enormous explosion that led to
Right.
all these nuclear explosions in the sky. How did water be created? Essentially, how did water come to be in its flowing ideal state from the Big Bang, from these stars and material planets? Like the matter. Like where was the origin point of this flow state?
Well, first thing, um, I don't think there was a big bang. I think it was a big splash.
I think you've said that in a video, right? Yeah.
So that's like first thing, because
Mm-hmm.
when we look at the universe, we see fluid dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
all the movements and everything. We don't see an explosion. We see movements that represents movements in a liquid. So it's definitely something that to begin with was a fluid, a liquid thing. So I think in the beginning there was like a planet of water, almost, like this pearl that was just water, nothing else in its ideal state. So it was that combination of like, you can imagine almost like a fire core in the middle and water all the way around it in this perfect balance. And
Where did that come from? You know?
so if we go beyond that, we end up, I call it no space.
Mm-hmm.
It's no place. It's nothing. But it's beyond, because even nothing has a thing in it. It's before that. It's
Okay.
before, it's the
Mm-hmm.
moment you can achieve that for maybe a fracture of a second to be completely, absolutely nothing in your
Yes.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see how immediately the second that you step away from that nothing, that absolute emptiness,
Mm-hmm.
whole world is created.
Mm.
So as consciousness stepped out from being absolutely nothing, an entire world was created in a splash.
Ah.
That's the
So
and
there
it
is
just
no predating water. It was just either
absolutely
Emptiness
nothing. Yeah,
or okay, I see.
yeah, or
Okay.
that splash into being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think probably within, if we, so probably you can see an evolution of matter, just like you see an evolution of beings, right? Of architecture of life.
Mm-hmm.
So probably there was something that looked like that clear, maybe from like a gas into a liquid into a solid, and then different solids breaking out of that.
Mm-hmm.
A tree of matter, you get your table of elements.
Mm.
Yeah. So probably there was that kind of evolution of matter happening in that flow, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Because it
Different
is the flow.
combinations and yeah.
Uh,
So again, consciousness, from absolute nothing, everything was created. So even a rock is consciousness in a certain state,
mm-hmm.
in a very rigid, ordered state.
Potential consciousness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. It's passive in it. Because that's its purpose, to be the building block. Um, I think I use a lot of times like video games to explain, that becoming, because it's both, we build computers, we write softwares, and we end up also being the user, the character in the game, playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
Same for consciousness.
Mm. I see.
It creates this equation that it operates inside of,
Yes. We are the process. Mm-hmm.
and the user and the
And the
creator
user.
inside of it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's not, because otherwise there's separation. Otherwise there's somebody creating something for somebody else to play in it. But
Mm-hmm.
who's that somebody else? There's nobody else here.
Yes.
There's only
Yes.
one thing here.
Exactly.
So as long as you stay away from separation, you always get the answer.
Mm.
But once you start separating, that means no, you're heading the wrong direction.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful, man. Oh. So I had a question. Totally forgot it because that was a great quote. That was awesome. Um,
There's a lot. I mean, I can talk for hours without. I mean, we can. I'll be happy to do this again with more, because there's more projects in the pipeline right now.
yeah, can you go over
There's
what's in
a
the pipeline?
there's a new book that explains why nature created human beings, why human beings were created. But it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of almost like an animation. We've been working on the drawings for it for over a year,
Mm-hmm.
and that book is, yeah, it's kind of the project for me, where I explain everything but through a story, in a
Mm.
very, it's kind of the story that is before the Bible, before Adam and Eve.
Mm-hmm.
My story ends with the creation of Adam and Eve, and it's
Oh, that's
it's
great.
kind of like how to recreate that connection between water, nature, and human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people live today thinking that we are separate of nature, that we're
Mm-hmm.
some kind of a bad, evil actor within nature. I'm like, no, nature created us for
Mm-hmm.
a purpose, for a reason. Once you understand that, it's easier to continue. Um,
What's the purpose?
well, the purpose again is to live. I think human beings are the spaceship, basically, that water is leaving this planet with, through,
Mm-hmm.
and everything else is an extension of our body to achieve that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's why before, dinosaurs and other creatures, they were just too big.
Mm-hmm.
There was no way to leave this place. But we're the perfect. We're cells. We're very different from the rest of nature.
Mm-hmm.
We are cellular. We are in, and we are creative. We are architects. So basically, it's like single cells have created a bigger version of themselves.
Yeah.
So the nature around you is a world of single cells.
Mm-hmm.
We're giants. That's why we don't understand that world.
Yeah.
But then this was created to have those single cells live in these bigger cells,
Mm-hmm.
in even bigger cells out
Mm-hmm.
to space.
So
And
what
again, and
is
achieve the independence of water in space.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the next step. So I look at this as like an evolution of consciousness slash water. So what's the next step after water evolving into human beings?
Well, I think so. the end goal is to get back to water being a singularity.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we are cells isolated. Like I said, we're astronauts outside of the body of consciousness. And the end goal is to be fully connected again.
Mm-hmm.
So we will create those structures that will allow that full connection in a bigger scale.
Mm-hmm.
So single cells, like trees and plants, they're fully connected.
Yeah.
They have their one system of water, one system of roots. They're fully connected. We're not. We're still in the first. We're like plankton in the ocean. We're still those vehicles that are independently moving around.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can visualize it, it will be, like I said, a closed system of water flowing through matter. But that water will be free from all connection to water or labor.
Mm-hmm.
The connection between water and matter is what causes all the suffering and pain.
Mm.
Once water is disconnected from it and lives in a fully automated world, but then water is just flowing through it, free of that work, free of that, then that's the goal. And then it will go back to that singularity of mind. It will be one fully connected body of water, consciousness.
So why do you think water? I mean, I know this goes beyond words and concept, but so if I can choose my words, why did water choose to incarnate itself into a human being to suffer? What was the need for our own suffering?
Well, I think the question is asked from the point of view of a human being,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But suffering doesn't exist in the world
To
of
water.
water.
Okay.
Yeah. So, right, let's say you build an automated car and you design it so when the gas is low, it has to go and refuel. And
Mm-hmm.
this annoying light and beeping sounds that will tell you go fuel right now, unless otherwise, that's like the headache you get when you don't drink or eat,
Mm-hmm.
or like. And there's an evolution that we keep improving the vehicles, right? So
Yes.
100 years ago, 50% of people will not survive birth
Mm-hmm.
or survive a simple cut from an infection. And so we're constantly improving the vehicles and the way we design them, treat them, fix them, all that. So
Mm-hmm.
there is an evolution of, I call it evolution of creation,
Mm. That's good.
right? Like there's no just creation or just evolution. We see the
Mm-hmm.
evolution of creation. We see that somebody is doing something and
Mm-hmm.
constantly improving and making it better. So when we look at it from the right scale, from the scale of single cells,
I'm just
not the
laughing at your
all,
cat, so I'm sorry.
not the Almighty God, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the Almighty God that can do whatever He wants. Within this human story, it starts from single cells building up. So a tree is under the elements, doesn't have the freedom of movement. Then you have a person, which is kind of
Mm.
a walking tree, and then we improve that person, and then that person eventually has a shell around him, like a vehicle, spaceship, space station.
Yes.
The
Yes.
whole journey is housing water in architecture.
Mm-hmm.
the
And
the
it seems
ocean
to
is
be.
homeless in space. Like the
Mm.
ocean is homeless,
Mm.
and it's not in an ideal state. It's very cold, it's full of salt. The
Yeah.
ideal state of water is actually to be warm and clear.
And if we are just the vehicle for water, and water is, in a way, spirit, like we explained before, we are the homes for spirit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
That's great.
you're a house for the spirit.
Hmm.
Exactly. And when the house breaks down, the spirit leaves it and goes back to that ocean.
So this is an evolution of spirit that it's not finished yet, in a way. I don't think it ever
No,
will
not
be.
at all. Exactly. So exactly that, and that's the design of this game.
Yes.
It's
Hmm.
that, and it will keep moving infinitely and grow, at least until we house. I mean, think about it. Let's say the entire ocean is housed. That's a lot of architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a lot of water in space that is frozen right now. So
Mm.
then we moving on to space. So there's more water to house, so it's
Hmm.
like this, it's endless. Yeah,
Do you
it
think
can be.
if we were to find an alien species, uh, and it was of
Water
of or
based.
water-based organic species, would they you think through the process and order of the universe kind of be pushed in a way to evolve to kind of look like us in a way, like bipedal species, two eyes, nose, and a mouth? Or do you think
um
water's evolution is kind of has a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Like flexibility in how it evolves itself?
so you do see that in the structure of water, because that fractals up, there's kind of a core and two, like when we look at the H2O, right? There's the center unit, and then it has two, it's basically like the two engines. So for something to move in space, that's all you need. Because like a
Hmm.
spaceship will just have two rockets. That's all it needs. And
Hmm.
then it can fully control its movement.
Hmm.
Then from there, it moves up, right? Because when you see an embryo develop, same thing. There's a core unit, these two things, and then they develop into arms and legs. When you drive a vehicle, like a bicycle, same thing. You have a center unit, the two moving
Yes.
airplane, center unit, two engines.
Mm.
So you can see the evidence of the user in the architecture of the vehicles, right?
Mm.
Um, so
I
there
see.
will be something of that, I think, in those creatures,
Yes, the
for
evidence of
example.
like the vehicle,
Right.
and then there might be extremities that might be a little different from ours.
And then you have the actual building blocks, right? So if you go to different countries, houses are in different colors depending on what's in the ground,
Hmm.
right? Like the different, especially the older architecture, which is just took mud and straw and built houses. Or so life is very site specific. So it depends on what elements are over there for water to use.
Oh yes. Hmm.
Then the architecture will follow.
Hmm.
So they might be gray color, they might be green color. Who knows? Like we don't know what color they'll have. And then that matter, whatever the structure within that, we don't know what structure they can build. Maybe
Hmm.
things that are far more complex or simple, far more rigid or softer. We don't know. It
But there
really
will be
depends on
some similarity just because
some
of
similarities.
water. I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or I think it's more like the nature of a vehicle. It's the
Hmm.
laws of nature, right? The law
Yes.
of nature will meet the need. And so there's 100 companies that make cars, but all cars are relatively functioning the same,
Mm.
right?
Yes.
But then that's where consciousness comes into play, the self-expression. You can find your car in a parking lot because there'll be that one little sticker, that one little color, your choice of wheels, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Even all phones are the same, but nobody has the same phone because they have different cases, and we always personalize things, you
Yes.
know and that's where
Mm.
the personality and the creativity of consciousness comes into play.
Mm.
The clothes we're wearing, I mean, so many of the things, so something, it will be interesting to see that on a species that's completely different.
Mm. It has to be possible, right? Do you believe that there are other water beings, other vehicles for the spirit?
Anywhere that there's liquid water in space, there's already living being, there's architecture.
Yes. Hmm.
Right now the closest one will be Europa, the moon of Europa.
Hmm.
we they said we know that there's liquid water under the ice. So the next mission that they're working on is to send a rover out there that will drill into the ice. And, over there it will be just sea creatures.
Hmm.
But think about sea creatures that evolved for billions of years. That will
Hmm.
be really interesting. So that will be the most exciting find. And even if they don't drill deep enough, they'll find, skeletons or evidence of living creatures in the
Hmm.
ice, frozen in the ice towards the surface.
When is this
Um,
happening?
Pretty soon. They're working on it now. The same team that worked on the Mars rover.
Oh, oh.
Yeah, it's in the works. I think they have a date for it. But anywhere you'll find liquid water, you will find architecture.
Hmm.
And then the only question is how long it's been going on. So
Mm-hmm.
if you know for how long the water was liquid, you can kind of predict what you will find, because we know here the evolution of creation here. So we know, in this amount of time, you'll probably find bacteria. This amount of time, you might find a single cell. This amount of
Mm-hmm.
time, you'll find plants, and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so on. So it just depends on how long the water has been active.
There's so much that you can learn from studying how water acts.
Yeah, astrobiology is definitely, if there was one field that I would go to, would be astrobiology,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a field that is free from the old science, the old
Oh yeah.
ideas of evolution. They don't
Mm-hmm.
care about it. They just look at, okay, we need to find life or make life. What do we need? We need water. We need matter. We need, they look at it
Mm-hmm.
in a very simple way, which free,
Yeah.
because the theory of evolution is what ruins everything for everyone.
How
you know
so?
well,
You think it's
it's
too
not.
rigid?
um there's elements within the theory that everyone claims were proven and they were not.
Oh.
And then you study it in school as if it's the law, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just confusing for people. The idea that life is random never was proven. There's never a randomness within DNA that created the life that we know today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there's very, like, the very specific elements is if it's random, then life is meaningless.
Mm.
If it's not random, then it's not meaningless.
Yeah.
And then
Mm-hmm.
the conversation, like you said, yin and yang, the conversation is of duality. You either believe in evolution or you believe in God.
Mm.
I'm like, wait a minute, there's something in the middle there.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Like, my consciousness is not something that's in question. And I can always talk about my conscious experience and my consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's something that nobody can take away from you, and you can use that. Um, but it's funny, because if somebody believes in evolution being random and life being meaningless, then I just tell them, so why do you care what I think? Why would you even sit here and argue with me right now?
Yeah,
That was the
that's
case.
true. Mm. That's just a sense of nihilism, I guess.
Confusion.
Confusion. Yeah. Amnesia.
Yeah, and we're designed. I mean, that's important, I think, to know, is that we're not here to discover the meaning of life.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to live life.
Yeah. To be the
That's it.
meaning of life.
This is the meaning. This vehicle, this architecture is the meaning of our
Mm.
being. And when you're born into a healthy environment, life occupies you fully,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the ideal state. And then you don't left to look for answers or questions, or
Mm-hmm.
when life is not healthy and doesn't treat you right, then we look for reasons, like, why am I here, why.
Yes.
And then we find we find that reason to be alive, and within the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
So we find it through connection to animals, to plants, to nature. And then we find, so a lot of times, because people will judge each other no matter where you are. If you're on this side or that side, people will judge you. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
how come people don't think about these things? Or why don't they care about the meaning of life? And
Mm-hmm.
the other side will judge you for being too out there. And,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
so,
right.
but the real thing is just to live your life and enjoy it,
Yeah.
and be productive and creative,
Mm-hmm.
which is what life does. So that's,
Yeah.
yep.
And just get lost in the flow, just like water,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 'Cause, hey, no matter what you think about life, you will drink water, you will eat food,
Mm-hmm.
you will take care of this vehicle, which is really your one thing. You have this entire universe in you. Talking
Mm.
about 100 trillion cells.
Mm-hmm.
Each one of them is conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Each single cell is a conscious individual, and you're the singularity of that 100 trillion cells.
Hmm. How would you
So,
define conscious or a living being?
well, the way we define it is usually if they're aware of their surrounding and they react to it, right? So, like, a plant is aware of its surrounding and it reacts to it.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the sun? Where's the water? Where, an animal obviously does that. Human beings do that. So the only thing that misses is like all the, like the table of elements, the elements that are passive elements,
Mm-hmm.
they don't react to their environment.
Mm-hmm.
They are the environment. They just experience it, but they don't react to it. So that's why I call them potential consciousness or passive consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And then
So like
there's
a
the
sense of
active.
active decision making. Oh, not really decision making, but just what is a reaction then? Can we go into that? So what constitutes something that reacts
Reaction, action, right? So something is happening and I'm reacting to it.
to that energy?
I'm
I see.
acting to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So taking that action. And even if somebody is in the vegetative state, their body inside is still active and reactive. Like
Mm-hmm.
that whole universe is still working and alive.
Yes.
Just there's something wrong with the mechanism of physically operating the body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I take the steering wheel out of your car, but the car is still on and you're sitting in it, and
I
the
see.
AC is working, the music is working, you're
Mm-hmm.
still inhabiting that vehicle,
Yes.
but you're just not able to drive it anymore. So, and we see a lot of that with homelessness now here, all the RVs and those, they're homes, they're still houses, but they lost their functionality to react and move in the
Mm.
environment. So, but I think to me it's simple. Any vessel of water is a vessel of consciousness.
Mm.
And that's proven. Every vessel of water is reactive and
Mm-hmm.
react to its environment.
In its ideal form, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Hmm.
And people that were in vegetative state and came back to consciousness after
Mm-hmm.
many years, they said, I was there, I was here. I
Mm.
heard you, I felt you, I knew what was going on. I just could not activate this vehicle, something, there was a shortcut somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, consciousness is a constant. There's no on-off switch.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the
We're
thing.
not. It's not like the baby in the womb gets to a certain moment where the switch is on and I'm conscious.
Mm-hmm.
It's a flow of consciousness.
Yes. It just is.
Yeah, there's no on-off switch.
It's like it just is, but there also isn't.
Well, no, even in the isn't, it is.
Exactly.
Consciousness, and I think that's why there's something rather than nothing,
Yes.
because it's just sitting there in no space, no place, no time. And how
Mm-hmm.
long can you sit in that before you have an idea and boom, sparks another world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Every second you have some spark, an entire universe is created in that one split second.
Mm-hmm. And that makes me not afraid that these very profound ideas make me um, kind of give me like a place in this world and kind of know that it's going to be okay and that this is meant to be. Like this isn't like an accident like we talked about before. This isn't just a
Right.
random occurrence of atoms that just so happen to become a human being. There is order. And if there is order, then why should I fear the process that I am? There's like less resistance with these viewpoints. You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I mean, and that's really the goal, because I think it's it's not functional or helpful to think otherwise. For me personally, it's just not logical. The way my brain works,
Mm-hmm.
it's not logical to tell me that a few rocks slowly, without any intervention, reached the level where they gained consciousness. Like, rather, it's more logical to me that consciousness became rocks, water, life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just logic. It's the logic about complexity, intelligence, architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as an architect. I mean, take a few sticks, shake them as much as you want. You're not gonna get an A-frame. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Or I think in the past the clock was used as take all the pieces of the clock, shake them for hundreds and millions of years. They're not gonna reassemble as a clock by mistake.
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
Same for our life. And people, because we are giants, we don't see the complexity of life within us. The
Yes.
complexity in there is insane. And to think that that's random, it's just not logical or intelligent.
Yeah, because we have a whole universe inside of us, trillions of cells. It's doing their own
Yeah.
thing.
The video I'm working on now, I just finished the script for it, is do we live in a simulation? So I'm going to explain that whole and why we think we live in a simulation and how, and that goes back to the body and the way we experience life through this body and the way water experiences life. So it just triggered that in my mind right now. But um
Do we?
yes and no.
Yeah.
Human beings are not in a simulation, water is.
Water is in the simulation of a human being.
Right. Like
Oh, yes.
water consciousness. When I say water, I mean consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness created, like I said, the video game, the simulation,
Yes.
and is acting inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
Where we as human beings are not, we think about it again as human beings, our point of view. So is there somebody else that put us, my body, somewhere in a simulation, kind of like the Matrix,
Yeah.
and my body is actually somewhere else, and my mind is hijacked into a computer simulation, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's just kind of interesting. So that's not happening. That will happen in the future. We will
You
create
mean
that.
literally? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think, when you think about that next step of evolution into space that we talked about, it's possible that your body will not be physical anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You won't be doing labor anymore. That's the reason you have those tools. Like I said, we'll be free of any labor. All that will happen. Like matter will move matter. We'll just use, right now, you can imagine it through like mapping your brain waves, and you just think about it and it happens.
Yeah.
So in that way, water will think about it and it will happen rather than water actually doing it itself.
Mm.
Right.
That's
So
so.
that
That's far up.
so that's where we will be in the simulation.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But right now, as it is, you don't experience anything directly. We all know that. Eyes, touch, all our sensors. This is technology. Our body is a technology.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, all of our senses are artificial. So if I plug a different input to your eyes, a different input to your ears, a different input to your taste, so we understood that it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as the philosophy, you say, well, if it's possible, maybe we are in it.
Mm-hmm.
But we as human beings are not. But for water, the experience of life is like a simulation. And that's why we even have that concept, an idea
Mm-hmm.
that it's possible. It's like a little video game where they keep coming at you and you have to.
Just trying to keep you on your toes. That's funny. Oh man, I don't even know where to take this one. I mean, what we just talked about is the concept of Brahman and Atman. They've known this concept for thousands of years, and we're just putting it into different terminology. And it's interesting that Brahman comes into Atman. Brahman, the infinite consciousness, comes into Atman, us as a human being. We all hold that in us, and then it seems to be we're creating our way back into the the infinite consciousness. Like
Yeah.
we're like if we are going to technically hook up ourselves, our consciousness, up to a computer, which it might be a little more complicated than that in the future, but we'll say, keeping it simply, we plug something in our heads and we go back into the infinite consciousness where anything is possible. It seems like it's just part of that cycle of of infinite consciousness coming in, flowing into the vehicles, and then we go back into that infinite consciousness void, dreamlike state of computerized infinity, whatever that is like. I don't know. And then probably from there, we're going to create another simulation.
Hmm.
And it's like this flow. It's this process. And
Yeah.
that's why water is such a perfect analogy, because water is the flow and it's right in front of our eyes. We drink it every day. We shower. We everything. It's literally us. Like the answer is right here, and
Right.
we're just like, oh, it's just nothing. It's just water. We take it for granted. It's a beautiful thing, man. The message you're spreading. Oh, I can't even put it into words. It's so like it's changed my life. It's just in terms of my perspective on seeing how just my place in this world and in nature and how it all relates. It's a great thing, man. I also like to say, I don't know if anybody's ever pointed this out to you. I thought it was great that your name is Moses.
I was
Is
named
it-
after my grandfather, so I just the name was there. I was
yeah,
born with it.
it's meant to be, man.
You know what the meaning is of the name? So the name, the story was that they put the baby into the Nile, and
Hmm.
then the Pharaoh's wife saw the baby flowing down the Nile, so they pulled the baby out of the water. The name Moses in Hebrew is the action of pulling something out of the water.
Oh,
So, which I see it as our coming to being.
yes.
We're that little vessel of water pulled out of the river of life. So
Oh.
the name itself has that meaning of coming out of the water
Hmm.
that way. But yeah, it's only later on I was just like, well, this is too much, but it's just what it is. It just sometimes things line up nicely,
Hmm. It's meant to
but I
be,
think it is important though to say that I don't see any of this as my philosophy or my theory. I see it more as um, I'm just showing another aspect of what was said for thousands and more than that. I think we always have been conscious.
Hmm.
So I'm just coming to it from a different angle of
Yep.
architecture
Hmm.
and faces of water, the ability to see it. So
Mm.
it's like we always knew we have bones in our body, and one day somebody invented X ray, and then
Mm.
we saw it. And then we learned a lot about that.
Hmm.
So that's all it is. I think Faces of Water is just it's a technology that allows us to see something we always knew was there. Um, like I said, the first philosopher, that was his theory. The first philosophy, the first logical man on this world said, water is the first principle.
Hmm.
you know, I've never said anything more than what he already said.
Hmm.
So I think it's important to know my message in my work is more everyone knows this. If you're able to be still, if you're able to calm down the stress, anxious beings that we became in
Hmm.
life, once you're able to do that, all the knowledge is in you and you can reach and find it there.
Hmm.
Like everything I know intuitively. I didn't study it, I didn't read it. I have hard time reading, I have hard time, like everything is just from looking at nature, finding that space, experiencing life. And everyone can do it and everyone has that in them. So for me, my goal is more to help people find that within themselves.
Hmm.
Because only when you truly find it yourself and know it, then you can practice it. Then you can be there in that place.
Yes. Hmm.
No, no following of a person or a guru or a cult or a leader or whatever.
Hmm.
None of that will ever give that to people. And also in my work, that's why I stay on YouTube. Keep my distance. It's
Hmm.
never personal. It's never about me telling somebody what to do or how to do it.
Yes.
Like if you don't find it yourself and that space in you, it's just not there.
Hmm. That's
Just
so
to
important.
Yeah, life is stressful. People are very anxious, and that's what robs them from that knowledge and that peacefulness that comes with it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Unfortunately. Yeah. I'm great. I'm glad you said that because I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it really just comes down to an individual direct experience that we all have to kind of internalize. And yeah, I mean, no podcast is going to do it. No water photography is really going to do it for anybody. But if you do it yourself, then these things might mean a little more to you. They might not. That's okay. But like, it's just symbols. They're just
Yeah.
symbols to point us in the direction. And your symbols, the way that you're doing is a very different take. But yes, you're right. It is. This is just a concept that has been it's just the idea of the why we're here. It's been spoken and talked about for thousands of years. but this is a different take. It's just a different take on the same exact thing, is that we are of this entire process, and then we're also not, it's like it's that bridging the gap between material and spirit. That's always
Right.
been there. It really has. It's,
And we
that's the,
belong. Yeah,
yeah.
you're inside of the whale. You belong. You're inside of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not. For me, a person that feels like they don't belong here, unless you're floating in space on your own, you belong. You're inside of the thing. There's no
Yeah.
other way to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe what's happening is that in the past we had people had religion, spirituality, mythology, and then there was this shift towards science, but there was also this kind of separation of like one, which was very much political. It was about power and
Yep.
politics. So today there's lots of people that grew up without any connection to the spirit. More than that, they were taught to judge and look down at anything that has to do with the spirit
Yeah.
or people that talk about the spirit. And I think, and that robbed them from something. And then
Mm.
you're left with really random, meaningless life. And then
Mm-hmm.
if your personal life is not that good, then what? Then you're really in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that today, as people talk so much about identity through gender, sex, and in general, race, um, it's slowly coming back because suddenly people talk about, wait, this is my body, but I feel different.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else in this body that is not what you see.
Mm-hmm.
So slowly they're actually opening the door to bring back who you truly are, which is not this body.
Yes.
And it might be that in your spirit, you're more feminine or masculine, you're more this or that, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And they start, so now we start to talk about that more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's
And I think,
salvation.
and it opens the door um, to understanding yourself as just consciousness, as just water, and what you were before this body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and it's funny. I mean, not everyone are even ready for that yet.
No, yeah,
Like
you're right.
like
Yeah.
some people, they just want to attach right now to their race or to their sex or to their gender or to their like something like the attachment we're making right now to the body is actually more harmful.
Yeah, right.
You do
We're
so much
identifying
more than that.
more with our body. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or creating more separations,
Yeah.
right? Because you can create infinite categories.
Yeah, right. That's true.
and and the more categories we create, the more separation we create
Yeah, the further it takes us away from the ultimate
each other.
category, each other.
Yeah,
Yeah, essentially each other. That's what it
yeah.
is. Hmm. That's beautiful, man. I don't even know where we can go from here, honestly. That's great.
Depends on how long you want to go.
I mean, I think we've been talking for a little over an hour now. I mean, if you want to wrap this thing up, do you have anything else, any closing words or statements you'd like to get off your
Yeah, I mean,
chest?
I would love to. First of all, I would love to come back and talk more about. There's other things like there's
Yeah,
a
I think.
project called Family Fluid Dynamics, which kind
Hmm.
of explains and helps people understand how who they know themselves to be, their personality is actually shaped by generation and generations of movement through consciousness.
We can get into that. I'll get into that. We can touch
Oh,
on that.
okay.
If you
Okay.
got time, I got time.
Yeah,
Okay.
because um, we see like our personality is shaped from the second we're created in the womb, and
Hmm.
everything that happens around us affects our personality. And the generations before you, your parents, grandparents, so on and so on, imagine them as life at the beginning is the rain falling down to the earth. Then your lifespan is flowing from there on the earth back to the ocean.
Hmm.
So you're born when the rain hits the ground, you're born. When you get back to the ocean, that's your exit point, right?
Yeah.
As that water does that, it carves its way through the landscape
Hmm.
and creates rivers. Now, when you hit an obstacle on the way, the river will bend and go around it.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the ideal way to for a river, left, right, and all that turbulence. And so over time, let's say that obstacle, let's say that's a trauma. One of your ancestors had a trauma and they had to adjust and work around it. So, like people that lived in the Holocaust had no food. And now, 3, 4 generations later, people still have issues with food and eating disorders
Mm-hmm.
going back, right? So there was a certain obstacle. You had to go around it and rewire your being. But then over time, the river actually wears down the obstacle. You
Mm-hmm.
don't even see it anymore. It's not even there. But the river still bends left and right. So when you're born now, you're born into thousands and thousands of years of shaping a certain river.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're born into it. You're inside of the river thinking, this is me.
Mm.
These are my issues.
Mm-hmm.
These are my problems.
Mm.
When in reality, they're not. And the obstacles are not there. You're just reliving patterns that were shaped and carved into stone, basically.
Yes.
And once you step out of that river and you can see the full landscape, you actually see that. Once you step outside of your family, outside of the parents, grandparents, and however they shaped your life
Mm-hmm.
to be, you can start to see that and carve your own way to the ocean again.
Ah, that's good. Mm-hmm.
And and a lot of times what happens is that we um, let's say if you have parents that are judgmental, for example, so they're very judgmental of everything you do and what happens is that you grow up and you become judgmental of them because they're treated you so bad and the way they are, and before you know it you became a judgmental person,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start applying what they did to you to your life and others.
Mm-hmm.
So we become our landscape, we become the environment we live in.
Yes.
We usually become what we hate and what we resent usually becomes we become that because it's inside us. And so the family fluid dynamics, I made a couple of videos about that. It's really about helping people see the river, see that they're not the river. I'm not the matter, I'm not the rocks, I'm not this river, I'm the
Mm-hmm.
water. I have the freedom of movement and flow, and I can recreate my way back to the ocean.
Yes. There is no true
That's
obstacle to water, right?
right. And you might face your own obstacles, but
Mm-hmm.
then also your job is to free the next generation from it rather than, if we play a victim
Mm.
to what happened to us, to our children, then they carry that with them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what happens a lot of times. Parents live as victims rather than give their children the freedom
Mm.
from the obstacle that they never had to face.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those
Mm-hmm.
obstacles are like ghosts. They're still there even though they're not there.
Yeah, they're there, but they're not forever because eventually the
So
water will either tear it down
it will tear down, yeah.
or find a new way.
Yeah. But now what you have is a landscape that was carved.
Mm.
An example for that will be, let's say, a book. A book
Also,
is, like when we carve things into stone, when we don't keep it free flowing, right? Most of the religions, cults are basically people that didn't continue with the flow of humanity in the story.
oh,
A group of people say, well, we stop here. We like the Old Testament. That's where it ends.
mm-hmm.
From here on, we're not going anywhere. Nobody
Mm.
else is acceptable. Our story ends here.
Mm-hmm.
Then somebody else, write the Quran, and they're like, well, we stop here,
I
nothing
see.
else. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the New Testament. And then, like the true freedom is to continue with the story all the way to today. But once
Wow.
you stop, that's it. You carved it into stone, and now you will live forever within that one pattern that's not relevant anymore. Or,
Wow.
at that moment. So the rivers are a metaphor to a lot of things.
Mm.
Again, it's a fractal. It can be your family, it can be your village, the city, the society, culture, which is a culture.
Mm.
Like that's what we do, right?
Yes, that's great. I feel like yeah, water can be put on anything, right? The metaphor of water can really be, if you if you're creative enough, and you are, it seems to be, you can put it on very many things. And I love the aspect of religion, like you said, like they just stopped, like they reached a halt, like
Mhm.
a dam or something.
Exactly.
When, yeah, it is, religion is really just this ever evolving process, it seems. And we are here
Mhm.
to, I don't know if you want to say create a religion, or just, we're just here to continue the story, continue the
Yeah.
flow. That's great, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. Break all the dams.
Exactly.
Standing
Exactly, man.
water always ends up badly.
It
It's
always wants to
either,
flow. Yeah, water
yeah, yeah.
always wants to flow. There's no like
Standing
such thing as
water,
still.
standing water will rot. It will
Yeah.
create mosquitoes. It will create illnesses.
Mm,
Yeah. Standing water. You see it also with people. If a person is like on the side of the sidewalk, stagnant in place, they
mm,
just rot. It's really, movement is the key to keeping water healthy.
mm-hmm.
Movement all the time. And there's
Which
one more
means
thing in our body too. Do you know what fascia is, or have you?
I've heard of
Fascia.
it. What
So
is that?
basically, there's a network of water in your body,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really where consciousness is. Like your whole body is conscious. And when I first started this work with water, I didn't know about fascia, but I predicted that there is something like that in our body. I was like, well, how is the water reaching every cell and every place and occupying the body fully, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the bloodstream is like a highway of cars. It's like little iron vehicles that are just flowing. I was like, where's the pedestrian way?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the highway, but there must be a pedestrian way for water.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think like 25 years ago, they was the first time they were able to put a microscope under the skin of a living person. Because when we die, the body dries out, and then they will do autopsies. And they always thought that it was like fiber that was holding together muscles and bones. And but look up a video. It's called Under the Skin, about fascia. And basically, there's this network of gelatin tubes, really like jellyfishes, like clear tubes all through your body. And it's called fascia. And water flows through those tubes. Those tubes defy the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Like they're both, tensegrity. So actually, that's what holds your body. It's not your muscles, is the fascia. They're like fabrics of those tubes going all through your body. And when a baby is born, at the beginning, all they are those tubes and bags of water. And then slowly, certain tubes get filled with calcium, certain tubes becomes bags and become the different organs.
Mm.
That's what you are at the beginning. You're like a jellyfish. And then
Mm.
slowly the structures are just filling in those tubes,
Wow.
creating your body.
Mm-hmm.
So the fascia network, the other thing is that also you'll see, let's say, one tube of water suddenly splitting into two separate tubes. You'll see T sections moving across things that are just not possible in the material world.
Oh.
So fascia is something new that we're just learning about and understanding. It is the network of water in the body, and most likely the network of consciousness in the body, because our whole body is conscious.
Mm.
The brain is more like a government that helps operate hundreds of trillions of cells
Mm.
and operate in the material world outside. But it's not the source of consciousness.
Yeah.
Our
That's a good way
brain
to
is
put it.
not where consciousness is. It's like saying the government here is the only living people around,
Mm-hmm.
like consciously people around. No, it's a whole body. Every cell has to be conscious for you to be functional.
Mm.
So fascia is something I'm going to study more, talk about more,
Yeah.
and
Sounds interesting.
yeah, I think it helps again for people to understand the role water has. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you keep hydrated, that system works well. But when
Mm-hmm.
you start drying out, you start losing those tubes and you start having issues with your body.
So it's like a network.
It's a network. It's like, just imagine fabrics out of infinite amount of fiber, but each fiber is a tube with water flowing through it.
Mm.
And it goes into every bone, every cell. It just That's the origin of your body, actually, the
I'm
beginning
actually
of
gonna
your
look it
body.
up right now, so like anybody watching can get a visualization of it. So how do you spell it?
Fascia,
S C I
Fasc.
A.
Yeah. And then there's a video that's called Under the Skin. And that's really one of the few videos online that you can see it.
Let's see if we can see this. So something like this.
So if you saw, there's a picture on the left bottom corner that looks like a
Like this one?
universe. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So here you see the pictures below it. That's the actual network.
Hold on, I'm just trying to open this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And if you
that
go,
is the network in our body.
yeah, and it's faster than our nerve system. It actually works faster. Like when you are about to fall and your body pulls up, that's the network that does that. And if you go back, there were actual pictures where you can see the water. Yeah, below to the right and
Oh
below. Yeah,
wow.
now
Yeah.
you can see the water in it.
Let me try and open this one. Hold on. Wow.
But that's
Yeah.
all over. So when you lift the skin, this thing spreads out and you see the tubes. But it's more like a fabric flowing through all through your body, your entire body.
That's crazy looking.
But when we die, that dries out and you don't see evidence of it. So for many, many years, people didn't know that we had this network of water.
Yeah, I can see how it is a network. It's like a web, like the World
Yeah.
Wide Web. It is
Yep.
the wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
awesome.
each one of those things is a tube. It actually, water is flowing through it.
Is this kind of like a more realistic photo? It might be a little gross, but
But that I think is a person that died.
oh, so
Yeah.
this is dead fascia?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can see the difference. There's no water essentially, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what actually is the matter of fascia? What is the building
I-
blocks of the
It's a gelatin of some kind. It's really like a jellyfish.
wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing, man. That's pretty cool.
So that's what I mean. Like everything we talk about here, it really comes from understanding scientifically the networks of water in the world,
Mm-hmm.
be it in trees, animals, people, single cells.
Hmm.
A single cell is really a little house for water.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little, yeah.
It's craziness. That's awesome. I'm glad we decided to go down that. I'm excited for what you're gonna tell us about fascia as well.
Me too. I'm gonna try and get some experts on the field and
Yeah.
talk to them. And yeah,
Yeah, you should definitely. Do you do like podcast like formats like this?
my favorite thing is conversation. It's just hard to find people to talk about
Well,
in
I'm always here,
something.
man. You can always talk to me.
Yeah, I'll be happy to.
Yeah.
Both, yeah, for both channels, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I also, yeah, if you can try to find somebody that I would enjoy, like the kind of nice conversation between somebody that is actually like an expert, quote unquote, not just some dude like me. So yeah, I would be definitely interested in hearing that. I think other people would too.
Cool, sounds good. But yeah, you are. I mean, from what I'm seeing, all the different interviews you do, you have an expert. Your expertise are in the wide range of hearing all those. Like, I will never get the chance to talk to all these people you talk to. So now you're building your library and cross sectioning things that, you know,
Yeah.
you have expertise that we cannot have because we're so stuck in our little tiny world. Each one in our little bubble.
Yeah.
You're creating this more of a cloud.
Yeah, that's kind
So
of what the goal is creating I guess it's the cloud of consciousness. That's why I call it the conscious perspective. It's like this
mhm.
whole it's just a viewpoint that you can reach by different means. It doesn't have to be like there's some people that might follow the monastic way. There's some people that might do it through water, or there's some people that might do it through study or psychedelics, whatever the avenue is. I think we all reaching the same kind of endpoint, if you want to call it an endpoint. It's the same
Yeah.
destination or viewpoint or mindset on life. So yeah, that's kind of my goal. And yours is a beautiful mindset to throw into the pot. It's definitely a very unique take on what I call the conscious perspective. So I thank you for coming on, Moses. This was really
A
awesome.
pleasure.
This was an amazing conversation. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
man.
let's
Do you
do it
have any
again
closing
soon.
statements? Yeah, definitely,
No,
definitely, man.
just thank you very much. It was very fun. And yeah, on Channel Water, people can learn more about specifically from the point of view of water. And I'll keep you posted anything I do, and we'll be happy to come and talk to you again.
Awesome. Thank you, Moses. Just gotta go with the flow, y'all. Go with the flow.
Thank you very much.
All right, man. Have a good day.
You
Peace.
too. Bye bye.